In this lesson, we're going to learn to fine-tune our Spring Security LDAP configuration so that it may handle any situation an LDAP throws at us. Currently within our security context.xml file, we are not providing much configuration of our LDAP authentication provider, and that's because our LDAP really conforms to some of the defaults that Spring Security expects. Unfortunately, if our LDAP does not conform to Spring Security defaults, we need to provide some additional configuration. You'll notice that we're using the user DN pattern attribute. This is a great way to bind to the LDAP if you store all of your users within a fixed location. So we know that all of our users are within the people organization unit. And the user DN pattern attribute just plops the username into this parameter, matches it with the UID, and then goes to this organizational unit. But what if not all of our users were stored in that organizational unit? For example, if we navigate to our LDAP and we expand the O'Reilly domain controller, and we create a new entry, and just hit next, and we're going to make an organizational unit. We're going to set the DN for this organizational unit to be others. And we're just going to hit finish there. And now we're going to place a user within that organizational unit. So I'm just going to copy one of our existing users and I'm going to paste them into our new organizational unit. I can go in and let's just change this up a little bit. We'll make this other doe. And we'll change the given name to other. And we'll change the email to just odo. And we'll set the username to odo. We need to remove that UID it put there. So we just have odo as the username, and then password will be the password. This user is within a different organizational unit. So how do we account for that within our Spring Security configuration? So the first thing, before we head back and do that, I'm just going to bounce our LDAP server, so that config takes. And now we'll head back and discuss this within our security context.xml file. We can no longer use the user DN pattern attribute. It's only for fixed locations within the LDAP. What we can use is the user search filter. This allows us to basically enter almost like a where clause or a predicate that's going to be used to identify a matching record within the LDAP for our user. So we put within parentheses our criteria. And we're just going to use UID is equal to the first parameter passed in, and that is going to be the username. What this will do is it will navigate through the entire LDAP and try to match any entry that has a UID equal to the username. So we're no longer restricted to a certain organizational unit. Now, while we're doing this, let's take a look at another attribute that we can provide when configuring Spring Security. We can specify a group search base, and this is where the Spring Security framework is going to look for the authorities for this user. Currently, it is set to search the entire LDAP. Now, if you wanted to limit this down for performance reasons, you can then specify an organizational unit where we start our current search for the authorities that a user may have. And let's navigate back to the LDAP to make sure we get this right. We're looking at our OU groups attribute. So you can simply grab the organizational unit equal to groups and place that within our Spring Security configuration. So now once we authenticate the user, Spring Security goes back and says, I need to find what authorities this user has. And because we have specified that attribute to OU groups, Spring Security will look within this organizational unit to find which groups the user is bound to. And it's going to do a search for the unique member attribute equal to the DN of the entry that is authenticating. In order for our odo user to log in, we'll need to make sure they have a unique member attribute underneath one of our groups. So let's go grab their DN, And we'll just copy that from the record. And then we're going to add them to our user group. So I'm just going to add an attribute, unique member, and we'll hit finish. And then we will paste their DN into our LDAP. Once again, I'm going to bounce our LDAP just to make sure this took effect. And then we'll navigate back to STS, and we're going to restart our server. And now we'll attempt to authenticate with the ODO user. So for the sign-in name, we're going to use ODO. For the password, we'll use password. And there you see we can now log in with the ODO user that is in a different organizational unit. You'll notice that we have specified the group search base. Well, there's also the group search filter. By default, this is set to the unique member. We've already seen this. The unique member is equal to the DN of the authenticated user. This first parameter that gets provided to the group search filter is the DN, and that's going to match up with the unique member. It's going to go back to our LDAP and find where the unique member is equal to the DN for ODO, and that's how it gets assigned that user role. Now you might be saying, where does the role prefix come into place? Because when we specify our access, we're mentioning, role underscore user, role underscore admin. Well, that is contained using the role prefix attribute. So if you just set that to role underscore, it's going to take the name of the group and prefix it to role underscore, and that's going to match our configuration. Once the group search filter matches the DN to a particular group, we also need to select an attribute from that entry to use as our group name. So basically we're saying what gets prefixed with role underscore user. That is defined within the group role attribute. If we look at the group role attribute, and then we navigate to our LDAP, you'll see that really the group role attribute should be our CN, and that's what's used by default, the common name, because that contains really the name of the group. So we're just going to set that to the CN attribute. We pretty much just specified the defaults here for ourselves to look at. So let's take that comma out of our config. And now we will restart our server and then navigate to our browser. We're able to log in with the ODO user, and we had a lot of custom configuration of our LDAP provider within our Spring Security config.